Can everybody see the screen okay, or do I need to adjust it some, or we're all good?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And can you hear me okay? I'll try to speak loud. Okay. Well, good evening. I appreciate you all. I wanted to thank Jean for allowing me to come and speak this evening. It's a privilege and honor to get to share our ideas with each other and experiences as a group, because we all have the passion of researching our family history. My hope tonight is that you all will come back with, go away with something new, whether it's a tool, a perspective, or even just a spark of curiosity that you can add to your own research. So what can you expect tonight? Well, I would like to clarify that I'm not a professional genealogist. I'm just an East Texas country boy who has enjoyed researching his family history for about 26 years now. All the credit for this presentation rightfully belongs to the Father, who has blessed me with the opportunity to share what I have learned. So to keep us on track, I would ask that you please hold your questions to the end of the presentation. We will have a Q&A then, and I'll be glad to answer as many as I can. A lot of people in the United States who first get interested in researching family history start with questions such as, where does my family come from? Where did my ancestors first arrive into the New World? Do I descend from royalty? Do I have Native American ancestry? And the one I liked when I first started was, am I related to anyone famous? It's an exciting idea imagining the journey that our ancestors made to America and what they experienced when they arrived. The problem is that in the excitement, sometimes we want to jump right on to a genealogy website like Ancestry.com and click on those shaking leaves, and before we know it, we've accidentally started climbing somebody else's family tree. A better, more reliable way to begin is not by chasing back to the immigrant right away, but by first working forward to complete your descendancy research. Once you've built out the full picture of your family tree here, generation by generation, then you're in the best position to trace back with confidence to the immigrant who brought your family to America. This is my immigrant ancestors from Italy on the ship. So when we talk about building a strong family tree, the key is to work from the ground up. Descendancy is not just a safer place to start, it's a smart one. It gives you solid evidence, it connects you with living relatives, and it helps you to avoid big mistakes. In a moment, we will look at some of the main reasons why this approach works so well. But first, when I say descendancy research, what do I mean? Well, if you're looking at descendancy, your descendancy, a helpful way to picture it is by looking at it as a tree. So we have the roots that are your children, your grandchildren, your nieces, nephews, the descendants of you, yourself, as well as all of your siblings. The trunk is you and your spouse, your siblings with their spouses, the central support of this tree. The branches start with your parents and branch out to your grandparents and move back further in generations. By starting with the roots and the trunk, your family here today, you're able to build a complete picture. Once the present generations are well documented, you can trace confidently up the branches to the immigrant ancestor who first arrived in America. So, think of this as like planting a tree. You wouldn't start with the branches. You would start with your roots and then ultimately the trunk that would grow from it. And this gives the tree your strength. Descendancy research works the same way, and beyond your research on track, keeping it on track, there are several practical reasons why starting this way makes your genealogy work more effective and rewarding. So you may ask, why descendancy? Here are a few reasons. Discover new records through collateral lines, find hidden information, pinpoint pinpoint migration patterns, connect with new cousins, break through those brick walls using DNA matches, uncover alternative records, reveal a complete family portrait, and verifying your research. Discovering your new records through collateral lines is where you may find your ancestor mentioned in a document belonging to a relative, for example, your ancestor's children or the grandchildren. These would be known as collateral lines, often left behind records that refer to their parents. And in those records, you may find clues that perhaps you've overlooked if you only have, say, like a birth certificate or a death certificate. You might have overlooked their will, any probate records, any deeds, etc. Our example with this is a man by the name of William M. Gleason. We were unsure where in Ireland my wife's 2 times great-grandfather was born until we located several records, his death certificate, his children's delayed birth records, and obituaries. These records provided the evidence of his place of birth, as well as provided the name of his father. But as maybe we have found on some of our records, the unknown appeared for his mother's name. And it listed both of them born in Ireland. However, what we could do is take these clues and go back to the fatherland, and we can dive in and do more research. So it's the groundwork here in the States and head across the pond. The next one is find hidden information. This is tracing our family's ancestors, siblings, and other collateral relatives. These could provide details that fill in the gaps of our family tree. For example, if your direct ancestor is hard to find, a record for their sibling might include information like their parents' names, origin, or clues about a migration. Our example here is my 2 times great-grandmother, Catherine Belinda White. After collecting what records I could for her, at the time I was unsure who her parents and siblings were, but branching out and looking at other counties for other death records for them, I was able to locate them, and then I built those together, and I was able to then create my tree to grow back farther and farther, and there were lots of exciting adventures that they had with their travels, and so that big mystery was solved. So again, it was using her siblings' records, not just the death certificates, but also some marriage records and some deeds, including wills also. The third point is pinpointing migration patterns. By tracing all of the descendants of an ancestor, you can observe where the family has moved over time. If a group of relatives migrated and settled in a new area together, you might discover a helpful trail of records in a new location. This helps us identify where to search for earlier records when a family suddenly disappears from a specific area. And our example here is my 3 times great-grandparents. His name was Tennessee Mathis Dean Grimes, and her name was Susan Mahaley Whitlock Grimes. And they left a really good paper trail of all their travels. It wasn't just in the census records that I began with, but it was all the deeds that I found, church records, and one of their children who was born in Kentucky at the time, there was a certified birth record for him listing in detail everything about the parents. And it was just really uncommon. But I utilized that as well as some of the grandchildren, Tennessee and Susan, to map out all of their travels. And it helped me to locate where their last home was when they both passed away. Connecting with new cousins. This was really fun. Following the lines of descent to the present day can lead you to living relatives. These cousins might have old family Bibles, photographs, military medals, letters, diaries, and memories that can shed light on your shared ancestors. Our example is this. I had been researching for over 20 years for the parents of the gentleman, Tennessee Mathestein Grimes. There was this big brick wall mystery. And still today, I don't know who his mother is, but I'm not giving up. And so what I did was I located a newspaper article in a Tennessee paper, and it was a court ordered telling all of the children and the grandchildren to come to court because one of the grandchildren of this man was suing this other family because there was some discrepancy in the land records. It wasn't transcribed correctly. So anyway, that was my first witness, as I call it. And then I actually found the very detailed and meaty Chancery Court records. And I mean, there must have been like 10 or 15 pages, but so fascinating to read and hear each of their sides of the story as, you know, I am related, he is my father, and so on. So that made it my second witness to back up that this William Grimes was the father of Tennessee Mathestein Grimes. And I also took an ancestry DNA test, and through that I was able to connect with 3 different sets of cousins who all descend from the same William Grimes. They all descend from a sister to my ancestor, Tennessee Mathestein Grimes. And they had all taken an ancestry DNA test, and they were like me. They could go back to that one person, but they had that brick wall. So I shared all the information I had, and so we were very excited in the genealogy dance, I guess if you call it that, to show that we could go back. And but again, I still don't know the mother, but I'm not giving up. So, but this was very exciting to get to meet these ladies. And sadly, the lady in the middle had passed away, but very sweet families here. The next one is breaking through brick walls with DNA matches. So this is continued on from that last one. If you've done a DNA test, tracing descendants of a specific ancestral couple can help you understand how you connect a group of unknown DNA matches. This can help you confirm a relationship or figure out which ancestral line a group of matches descend from. Modern tools such as Ancestry DNA's through lines can automatically suggest, and the word is suggest, and show descendants of the common ancestor who shares DNA with you, which is an invaluable resource. And when I said suggest, that there was a time I found a common ancestor with several DNA matches, but their line was not matching up with what I had found in the records. So I set them aside as part of my family, and eventually I was able to tie them in, but they were a part of another side of the family, not the specific one I was looking for. So sometimes on the ancestry DNA through lines, it is accurate. For example, if I have put in 4 or 5 people that are on the same generational level as I am, and they've tested, and I know for sure that they are related, then through lines will show the exact connection. Our example here is the long-lost Gleason cousins of New York, my wife's family. Recently, a new DNA ancestry match for her came up, which gave us some insight into her Gleason ancestry. This gentleman is a third to fourth cousin to her, and we can trace his lineage back to his second great-grandfather, as we can for Lee, my wife, and it's the parents of his second great-grandfather and her second great-grandfather that we are at this point to our brick wall. But prior to that, we had no clue. But now that we've got definite DNA, we are diving in and doing more and more research. Again, not giving up. Uncover alternate records is our next point. When researching an ancestor, you may hit that brick wall because traditional records run out. By tracing their descendants, you might find valuable information and records pertaining to a younger generation, which can help bridge a gap in your own direct ancestral line. These records might include the probate records I mentioned, wills, obituaries, military records, or city directories. The example here is my 3 times great-grandfather, James Finley Collinsworth. For many years, his parents were unknown, and I was unable to locate them. But I knew that he was born in the year 1860, so I began with the 1870 U.S. Federal Census, and I located him with his mother, living with a family, and there was a young girl living with them as well, which is kind of interesting because later this young girl and he would marry. But this didn't tell me who his father was. So I moved back 10 years in the census, and I found his mother and father living in the same county. But the question is, where did he go between 1860 and 1870? We know that in 1861, the American Civil War had begun, so I turned to military records, and I have a distant cousin living in Tennessee, where my Collinsworth family is from, and he and I did some digging, and we found the military records for his father. His father was named Jacob Collinsworth, and his mother was Jemima Blackburn, was her maiden name, Collinsworth. And the account that I'm about to tell comes directly from the military records, because this is all we have on my ancestor Jacob Collinsworth. So in the records, it notates that he was home on furlough. He was serving with the Confederate Army. The Federal Army captured him while he was at home and then marched him along with many other prisoners to a prison in Ohio. And he remained there for about a year, and then they transferred him and others to a fort in Delaware. And it was in very, very poor conditions, and a lot of men died there. In about 1865, right before the Civil War ended, this was in February, he and a list of other men were supposed to be transferred and given pardons once they arrived into the state of Virginia. The ship arrives, some of these men arrive, but not my ancestor. So the story goes, and this was actually notated in the record, that several of the rebels, once they landed on the soil of Virginia, ran off into Dixie and never came back. Maybe that was him, maybe not. The mystery still is unknown, but that's all right. One other thing was that when I was a teenager, I spoke with my great-grandfather, Collinsworth, and I had asked him just a random question, well, tell me about your great-grandparents, because I guess I thought I was being bright at the time. And he said, well, I never knew them. The only story I ever was told was that my great-grandfather fought in the Civil War and then afterwards went north, never to return, and abandon his family. So part of the account is somewhat true. What happened to Jacob, we'll never know. And very sadly, James was only about 5 years old when his father disappeared. So he really never knew him. He didn't get to grow up with him, and his mother was not eligible to apply for the widow's pension because there was no proof that Jacob had ultimately died. They just had his service records of him serving and where he had served. So that is about my James Finley Collinsworth. Revealing a complete family portrait, another point here. By seeing an ancestor as part of a larger family unit with its own network of relationships, you can gather a complete picture, of their life, the people that they lived with, who they interacted with. That would be like their siblings, their cousins, and their neighbors. All of these peoples provide important context and can inspire new research avenues when a direct line has gone cold. So this is another one of my brick walls examples. Seated in front is my 3 times great-grandmother, Laura Cox Collinsworth. She was the young girl that was living with my great-grandfather and his mother and the other family in the 1870 census and as I said, they later married. And this is a picture of all of their children except their oldest son, who my great-great-grandfather, he had died, and the next year this picture was taken. So my brick wall ancestor, Laura Cox Collinsworth, is still a mystery to this day. I had wanted to be able to locate her parents and maybe see if she had any siblings. So the research began. I again went to the 1870 census and I found her living with the family and my great-great-great-grandfather and his mother. But if she was born about 1862 and 1870, she's around 8 at the time. What happened to her parents? And most likely they both died and left her as an orphan. I have combed through all of the census records from 1870 until her death in 1949, so through 1940. I have also used the fan club method. That's the friends, associates, and neighbors. And there are some clues from both the 1870 and 1860 federal censuses that I have gleaned through and have some possible idea of who the parents might be. Another interesting fact with this family is there was another young girl that was about 2 years younger than Laura. And she was adopted by this other family. However, I've combed through all the court records and everything that I could in that county for her, and there was nothing. So they may have just taken her in, did no legal work, no guardianship records or nothing. And she ends up being the only child of this couple, and they moved to the state of Oregon where she married, had a family, and died. So I followed the same process with her, tracing her record by record, looking at all the records that I could find for her, as well as Laura. And still at this point, there is that uncertainty without proof. And sadly, none of her descendants have taken an ancestry DNA test either. So there's not that, but maybe one day they will. But again, I'm not giving up. So I like challenges, so I'm going to keep on searching. So she is my other brick wall that I have. Verifying your research. Very important. As you gather information on all family branches, you collect additional evidence that can confirm or refute your existing research. Seeing the same names, places, and facts consistently in the records of different relatives can confirm that you are researching the right family. Conversely, inconsistencies can reveal conflicting information that we need to resolve. So I have 2 examples here, both my wife's family. When I first began helping her research, I climbed the trees, as I showed earlier, and it was the wrong trees. And I was so excited we got one branch across the pond, and that was back to about 1000 AD in Wales. But very sadly, after researching, I realized that the family only remained in the southern states, and the majority of these people had lived in Pennsylvania and in New York, and there was just no connection. And when I went to re-verify all these records again, there was all these inconsistencies. And to top it off, because I thought I was a professional genealogist, I had made copies for her entire family, and we were so excited, and we gave them all out, and they were all so happy. And then after I did that, a year or two later, when I had found my mistakes, I had to swallow a pill or two, whatever I guess you could say, and then I had to apologize and say, sorry, we climbed the wrong tree, so we're got to start over. Another example for Lee was her other branch was that this family began in this colony of North Carolina. Eventually they immigrated to Indiana, moved to Illinois, down to Missouri, eventually coming into Texas. And again, I was just climbing the wrong tree, all excited. We had found this, this is wonderful. And realizing that these people were showing up in Pennsylvania again, and New York, and the inconsistencies. So I had to again delete a lot of the people in the tree, and I had to start all over from scratch, just with her, and I went back one generation at a time, and we finally got it corrected, and now we have the correct family all the way back to North Carolina, back to the early days of the Revolution. So, and as Robin Williams says here, when your results are opposite your hypothesis, but they give you new ideas for future research, that's the good stuff. So, thanks, Robin. So, far we have talked about, at this point, descendancy research, why it matters, why it's worth our time, and it's to follow not just our direct ancestors, but their siblings and their cousins and their children. And it helps us to keep our family connections alive. It helps us to rediscover stories that might otherwise be forgotten. And it helps us to see the bigger picture of our family's history. But the next natural question is, how do we do it? So, I'm going to explain some steps here of what I would like to call the tree ring analogy. I would like for you all to picture the inside of a tree trunk. When you cut across the trunk, you see rings, starting with the very center and then expanding outward, ring by ring. Those rings represent the stages of descendancy research. And at the very center is the core, the people that are still living, the relatives that we could call, we could visit and interview if they would allow it. From there, each ring moves out a little bit farther, and that goes to vital records, census, schedules, deeds, probates, newspapers, military records, and finally, advanced tools like full text search on the Family Search website. Each ring builds on the one before it, just like the growth of a tree. And that's how we move from memories to documentation, from family stories to history. We always begin at the center with the relatives who are still alive. They are the keepers of our stories, the memories, heirlooms, and connections. For example, your aunt might have a date in mind of when your cousin was born, but she can't remember it, but she might remember that it was snowing that day and the doctor couldn't get to the house. Well, that is good because that gives us some clues as to figure out, okay, what year was that bad snowstorm, and then, okay, let's look over here at these records. So even those little nuggets are great to have. That would be when you would be interviewing them. And they could give you maybe other names of relatives, relationships. They could pass down traditions that they had been taught over the years, sayings and stories. They provide the framework, and that is the heart of the tree. Once we have this framework, we confirm it and strengthen it with records that we can count on. That would be like the vital records, births, marriages, deaths. Those all give us solid facts. And also, census records show us the families in context. Who did they live with? What did they do for a living? And where were they living at this time? These are the rings that make the tree strong. They confirm the memories, all the accounts that we have gathered from our relatives, and we can line them up with historical reality. Next, we move to the middle rings. These add depth and detail. That would be your courthouse records, your museums, your libraries, and in the libraries and in local museums, they might offer community histories, photographs, and even have personal collections. Some archives hold school records, church registers, and even town council meetings. These sources give texture. Again, you want to take what records you've got, just as I did with my ancestor Jacob, serving in the military, and just build that story from that. All those facts came from that, and I'm so thankful that I was able to locate it so I could learn something more than just his name. The outer rings of the tree add color and life. These would be like newspaper clippings. And an example of that might be a wedding announcement, maybe a farm sale, or something small like a church picnic. Also in this category we have military records, and those often include detailed service histories. They give us physical descriptions of the person, and some even include personal letters. These records don't just tell us when someone lived, they show us how they lived. As researchers, I'm sure that we've all felt the frustration at times of coming up empty when we're sure that that record should be there, but it just doesn't appear. That usually happens because a lot of online searches mainly look at name indexes, and if the name was misspelled, you kind of have to play around with the letters, add special characters, etc. That's why Family Search created the full text search, and instead of only looking at names, they allow you to search using keywords such as widow or blacksmith or maybe orphan. Suddenly, the records that maybe we thought no longer existed or ever would exist come into focus because they have been able to locate them and digitize them for us. In terms of our three rings analogy, this is that outermost ring, the layer that ties everything together and helps us notice the details that we might have overlooked. It's the looking beneath the bark and finding hidden patterns in the wood grain. At this time, I'm going to share a brief case study about a man named Lenny Gleason. He was one of the brothers of my wife Lee's great-grandfather. George Leonard was his full name, Gleason, aka Lenny, was born in De Leon, Comanche County, Texas on March 11, 1896. He was raised in Eastland County, Texas, where he attended school, and he worked on the farm with his family. About 1915, Lenny decided to move to New York State, and he sought employment as a seaman. At the time of the draft, he was unemployed. After taking a job on the steamship, which was called the Montano, it carried fuel over from the States to Europe for the aircraft and other machinery that was used during World War I. Lenny boarded the ship, sailed away from New York State, heading to Ireland first and then later to England. It was between the ports of Plymouth, England and Portsmouth, England that Lenny and 23 other men would perish after their steamship was torpedoed by a German U-boat. It was later learned that by his family, that he died, and the sorrow would set in. Now, what I would like to do is take the account I've just told you and show you, intertwine it in with the rings that we've just discussed. The first rings, as we established, are vital records and census records. Now, there are no vital records for Lenny. Number one, he was born 1896, before Texas and several other counties in Texas would begin recording. Of course, we probably in our research have seen that maybe it's the 20s or 30s that it's actually enforced more. But there was no delay birth certificate at all for him. He never married, and where he died, unfortunately, there was no record for him recorded at all that we could find in the States or even in England. However, he does appear in the 1900 and in the 1910 United States Federal Census. They were living in Eastland County at the time, and from these two records and others, I was able to weave the account of Lenny together. The middle rings that we've established are where you would look in courthouses, maybe libraries, museums, and archives. And on the left here is an index to the probate record that's on the right. This was filed in Carter County, Oklahoma, where his parents were living at the time of Lenny's death. And his father, William Gleason, filed it because Lenny had left an insurance policy for them. The reason why he left Texas was to get a good job, get out of the farming, so he could provide and care for his ailing parents as well as his younger brother and sister. And so by researching in the courthouse records, I was able to locate this specific record. And there are several pages. This is just the cover page of the petition for letters of administration. The next one is the outer rings. This would be your newspapers and military records. Now, Lenny did not serve in the military, so he had no military records. However, when World War I occurred, the men in the U.S. were required to fill out a draft card. So he was one of those men that was required to do it, so he did. And from this, we can glean a lot of details. We can get his physical appearances. We have the employment, which, as it says, was unemployed, but his occupation is seaman. And we get his date of birth, as well as him telling the enumerator his place of birth, which was De Leon in Comanche County. So, because we didn't have that birth certificate, then I would use this as a source to back up his birth as well as his place of birth. The next slide is the casualty report that was recorded by the United States Coast Guard. This is the only record that we can find that proves his date of death and where it occurred. Again, from the census, from his military draft card, and from this record, I was able to weave that story together, and that's how we all can do it. If we gather what records we got, even if it's 2 or 3 at the most for one person, we can still sit down and create an account of our relative. The next slide is a newspaper article that is from the Sentinel Leader in Oklahoma that his father requested to have run. His father, William, went to the newspaper office and requested they run it to notify him if possibly his son was one of the survivors of that sinking. And there were about 14 men who did survive. This is the Montano ship, the steamship, and the website. So out of the 47 total people on board, only 14 were survivors. And unfortunately, Lenny was not one of them. The outermost ring of our tree is the full text search. And y'all, you may have used it. This is the website, and this is the web page here. Because it is such a powerful tool, I thought I might take just a few minutes to go through it and show you or work on one example with everyone. So I'm going to exit out of my PowerPoint here and switch over to the website. Okay, so you'll want to visit the FamilySearch.org webpage. And how I get to full text search is I just come over to the search option on the menu bar, and it is now under it, and I just select full text. Full text allows you to, as I mentioned earlier, to search by keyword, name, place, 1 year, or you could do a range if you choose, and an image group number. The image group number, should you wish to enter that, may be found on an index record on a genealogy website such as Ancestry.com, where they have the name, the date, and place, and it may say FHL, and there's a number or something like that. So you could take that number from Ancestry and you could paste it into the image group number, the DGS on the bottom, and search, and it would just open up that collection. It might be deeds, it might be marriages or deaths, etc. And then if you scroll down on the page a bit more here, we have find a collection. So if you know the collection that you might be looking for and you want to see if Family Search has it, then you can type it in. The example they give here is the Alabama Wills and Deeds circa 1700s to 2017. On the right side of the page, they have the advanced search tips, and that would include your parentheses, your plus symbol, minus, your question mark, and your asterisk symbol. So these are just some suggested tips if you choose to use their search. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to locate a record, a citizenship record for my grandmother. My grandmother was born in southern Italy. I'm half Italian, and my father was born in Massachusetts as well as his father. So I've got 4 greats and then the 1 grandparent who immigrated from southern Italy and arrived in Massachusetts and lived out their lives there. Her first name was Pacina, and we're going to search using that and her married name, because when she was married, she would have filed at that point possibly for citizenship and naturalization. So I'm just going to go here to the search under name here, and I'm going to put her name in quotation marks. And that's all I'm going to try. I mean, you can add a place if you want. I could put a year, but I like to, when I use this tool, I like to start out searching broad and then slowly narrow down the records. And you can narrow it down by state and by county and even city at some point. So we will move on from here and we'll select search. And look at there, we've got us a hit. Let's open this up here and see if this is her. I will enlarge the screen once the image is fully loaded so we can all see it better. Alright. Okay, so this is her actually. Wow, this is fantastic. Pacina Mary Palone. And it says up above it, I'm going to scroll up just a little bit. This is in the Superior Court of Berkshire County in the city of North Adams, Massachusetts. This is fantastic. So this tells me where this was filed. And if I look down just a little bit underneath her name, look at this. It says, my petition for naturalization number. Look, she gave her, this is wonderful. She gave her naturalization number, the date. So if I wanted to learn more, which I really do at some point, I could take just these little bit of information, and I know that it was in Berkshire County, Massachusetts, so I could go and search, maybe back in full text search for naturalization records for that specific county and see. So that's fantastic. One thing I'd like to encourage you, if you do use it, is that you want to search the pages before and after the image that you see, because there might be some information before it as well as after when they went to digitize it. It's just like, for example, the case with Lenny, his father, when he applied for the court for the petition to receive the insurance, that there was about 13 to 15 pages of that. So it was very well documented, and it was just a very precious thing to find. And that would be another example of finding something that we didn't even know existed. And for many years, an account had been passed down through Lee's family that her immigrant ancestor, this elusive William Gleason, had a brother named Pete. And Pete had been on a ship coming to America, and tragically it had sunk and he died, and everyone else too. But when we went back to do this research, we recognized that it wasn't this Pete, it was Lenny, because Lenny was the one who had perished along with many others on this ship, though not coming to America, but still. And so that's where we had mentioned earlier about the game of telephone, where I would start something and maybe at the end it would end up being different. So all accounts are important, and it is good to record everything, because you could take each one and go after this record, look for it, look for this record, and so on. Okay, I'm going to switch back really fast to my PowerPoint. I'm almost done here. And okay, so where else can we locate records? Well, my favorite thing to use to begin with is the Family Search Wiki. And this is the website. You can visit and you can search by state, by county. They have countries on there. And it's very helpful, because if you were to say, for example, know that your ancestor was born in Eastland County in 1925, and you're looking for the birth record, so you decide to make the journey there from wherever you live, and you arrive and you speak with the clerk, and they say, oh, I'm very sorry, our records for the birth burned, and we only have them from 1950 to the present. So in that scenario, just as an example, it would appear on the wiki page giving you the year of when they started and if there was any record loss at all. But we don't want to be like, oh dear, you know, the record loss, we just can't find anything, because we can find and utilize other records in that courthouse to assist us. And that's where actually going to the courthouse in person, in addition, after searching on the wiki, is important. And I have just a brief account to share. we were looking for the voter registration records for Eastland County, in Eastland County, for Lee's ancestor William Gleason, because we had been told that in some instances on a voter registration record, if a person was naturalized, that it would give you the date and possibly the court where they were located, where it had been naturalized, And so I contacted Eastland County because I couldn't find anything on the wiki about voter registration records. I went there first. And the clerk said, I don't think we have them, but let me transfer you and speak with this agent who is in charge of the voting registration for the county currently. And she advised that as well, we don't keep all those records. We feel like we toss them. And I just made a comment very kindly saying it's a shame that those records were lost because they do hold valuable clues that could help lead people to possibly find naturalization records or even prove residency of where someone lived, right? So she said, okay. She said, Robert, give me a couple days. And she said, I'll call you back. 2 days later, she calls me back and says, Robert, you won't believe it. I went into the basement of the courthouse and I opened up the vault, and there were those old voter registration records, not digitized or anything. And she said, thanks for mentioning that. Please come anytime and come and see. So we haven't gone yet, but that's an important point there, is that though they say perhaps they don't have them, sometimes under the stairwells, in the attics, in the basement with the creepy crawlies and all, they have boxes. Another example is in Jones County. They have several boxes in their basement, not digitized either, of school records from early 1900 to I think the 50s and 60s. And so again, if you don't ask when you call or visit, you won't know what they might have. So when should we do this? Well, I believe that it is time to do it now. All our research, gather our memories from relatives, do our interviews. Let's not have any regrets. I have some, as well as maybe you all, if you had a loved one that passed, that perhaps they held some family stories about this ancestor, or maybe they enjoyed researching family history and they passed and it's now lost. So we need to make sure to reach out to all those living that we can and speak with them, interview them, video them if they'll let you. As we wrap up today, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've covered. We've explored what descendancy research is, why it's so valuable for preserving family connections and uncovering stories, and how to do step by step from interviewing living relatives to confirming records, and finally using tools like the Family Search full text search to make sure no detail is missed. Descendancy research is more than just names on a chart. It's a way to keep family stories alive and to honor those who came before us. It helps us to create a richer understanding of our heritage. Each step that you take, each record found, each story preserved adds another ring to the tree of your family legacy. I hope today that you've all learned something useful and that you'll be able to take it back and apply it to your own research and build upon it. I appreciate and thank you all for your attention and enthusiasm. At this time, I will be glad to take any questions about that you may have and share your experiences in descendancy research. So, thank you.
Robert, that was great. Mm-hmm.